All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session today, Navigating a Post-Roe v. Wade Culture on College Campuses. Before we begin, I want to cover some housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, and we would like to ask you to please leave your cameras off and your microphones muted. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature, not the chat, and we'll get to as many of the questions as possible at the end of the session. Okay, now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Ms. Frank. Ms. Frank has been teaching English at Vance Granville Community College for 19 years. She currently serves as the project lead for Achieving the Dream at VGCC, and in her role serves on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Council. Additionally, she is the global liaison for Worldviews program between VGCC and UNC. As a result of her leadership, in December 2021, she received VGCC's Presidential Leadership Award for her dedication to ensuring that barriers to student success are removed by addressing equity both in and out of the classroom. Ms. Frank has a BA in English and a Master's of Education in Curriculum and Instruction, both from North Carolina State University. She became certified to teach secondary English in 1993. And received the Community College Teaching Certificate in 2000. She is currently pursuing a PhD in Educational Leadership, Policy, and Human Development in Higher Education at North Carolina State. And now I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Ms. Frank.
Okay, good morning, everybody. We're glad to have you here. I have my lovely sidekick, Jason Bryan. I make him do everything with me. If you've seen us in any other conferences, he's my co-lead for everything. Today, we're going to be talking about something pretty serious. I think probably most of you know what's going on in the country. If you don't, then you've been living under a rock, I think. We are going to address how we can support our female students who may be considering having an abortion or who have recently had an abortion and are struggling with their mental health, or maybe their just their medical care in general. And of course, we want to make sure that all of our students have what they need to be successful. So today we're going to focus on, we'll talk a lot about rape, but we're going to focus on rape with women in regard to Roe versus Wade. And as we go along, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask and we'll be glad to answer those. Okay, so the lessons before Roe and things that we learned before Roe versus Wade was put into law. So some of the things that we can look at that probably we will be seeing in the near future. So at the beginning of the 20th century, illegal abortions accounted for 1/5 of all maternal deaths. Okay. By mid-century, an estimated, and this figure really got me, 829,000 illegal or self-induced abortions, and they occurred in 1967 alone here in the US. So during that time, the same year, lack of abortion access accounted for almost 20% of all deaths attributed to pregnancy and childbirth. Okay, so that was before Roe versus Wade. So now we'll talk a little bit about the impact of Roe versus Wade, and I think you will find some of this interesting as well. Okay, so Mr. Bryan here did a little bit of study in law school, so he helped me with this part. So Roe versus Wade guaranteed a right to privacy at the federal level and at the state level under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. It specifically guaranteed the right to abortion, contraception, and a woman's right to control her own body. And if you think about it, some of the things that's been in the news lately, not only are we dealing with abortion, but there's the debate about will women in some states have the option to buy contraception. Okay. Okay, so women's abortion decisions. So this is some of the data that's available. This came from the Gottmacher Institute, as well as this information, the same information is available from Planned Parenthood. So if you look at some of the reasons that women gave, this is around 2004 is still the same type of data that's about the exact same that's available now. So these are some of the statistics. So having a baby would change my life. That's about 74% of what respondents said. Don't want to be a single mother. Completed my childbearing. We will talk a little bit about that. But the last two, if you look at those, that's where you're talking about being a victim of rape is around 1% what was reported, and a pregnancy as a result of incest. So that's about 0.5%. So what we're going to talk about is our students who may be experiencing any of these, any reason for these, okay? Now, here's the problem. With the data, when you look at 1% and 0.5%, we know intuitively that that's not exactly accurate. So the American Association of University Women did a study in 2016, which was kind of like right before the pandemic. So yeah. And this is what they have found across the country. So sexual assaults have been underreported, obviously. Okay. So if you see 89% of colleges and universities reported 0 incidents of rape. 0 incidents. So here's one thing I just want to tell you right now in the news, if you look it up, in the last week at UNC on campuses at Carolina in particular, 3 rapes were reported out of 5 days. So to say that 89% of colleges and universities have reported 0 incidents of rape, and then you look at the statistics saying only 1% or 0.5% are due to rape, there's a discrepancy there, obviously. So at this point as well, the federal government has to report, colleges have to report the number of assaults, rapes, date rapes, anything. That information has to be available to students, the public, anybody. And one of the things I did about a week ago is look up how easy it is to access that information. And at NC State, which is where I go, I tried to find that information on the website, and I really had to dig. It took about 15 minutes. And right now, if you asked me how to get there, where that information was, I couldn't tell you. And most universities are doing the same thing. You really have to look for that kind of information. I want to share a story with you now. And I think it can be pretty typical of women and why they don't report what they're experiencing. And so I'll try to make it through this. So when I was 16, I was raped by a man who was 32, and he lived 5 minutes from me. And so I had to see him all the time. People in the community knew him. And I got pregnant as a result of that rape. I was 16. I did not want to have a baby. And because I had grown up really poor and I had all these aspirations. I also was extremely embarrassed that I was pregnant in high school, even though part of me knew it wasn't my fault and that I was a kid, but I still wasn't embarrassed about it. So I decided, well, my best friend, who's 16 also, we decided that we would go 3 hours away. It was the closest abortion clinic. We drove there ourselves. And and this is the kind of experience and why it affects women's mental health. So we're walking in, it's 2 kids. We're walking in the abortion clinic. And there are these church groups, and I know they're church groups because they have their church buses outside the abortion clinic. And they're picketing back and forth in front of the abortion clinic. And they're yelling at women walking in to the abortion clinic. And they're saying, murderer, whore, you're going to burn in hell, all of these horrible things. And I'm walking in as a kid experiencing this, and nobody there has pulled me aside and tried to comfort me or love me. Instead, they're just yelling that I'm a whore, that I'm going to burn in hell. And I'm a child who has been raped. And I'm thinking, I grew up in the church. My uncle was a Southern Baptist minister. And that, that's not the way Christianity should be. So, or Christians should be. So we finish, I'm getting the abortion, first of all. It's getting ready to start. And I remember I'm lying there, and the doctor is really hateful. He was so hateful. And it's getting ready to start. And I kind of like take this deep breath, and I guess I maybe made a little sound, like I don't know, a sad sound or something. And he stopped and he said, do you want this or not? And, I said, yeah, I want this. I want to go through with it. So he did it. It was the kind of abortion. There are different types. This kind was the vacuum. So he did that. I left as we're going out of the clinic. Of course, the same people are there and they're yelling and look at you just killed your baby, you're a whore. So we get in the car, we drive, well, my friend drives 3 hours, 2 16-year-old kids. We drive home. That night, I'm in bed and I'm determined I'm going to school the next day. So I noticed that I'm losing a lot of blood, but because I don't know anything, I'm assuming that's normal, but I'm losing a lot of blood. But I go to school, and I start feeling sicker and sicker, but I was determined to stay. Well, I apparently had lost so much blood at home that my mother noticed in my room and in my restroom. And she came to school and got me because she realized, okay, something's wrong. By the end of the day, I was having an emergency D&C because the doctor who performed my abortion had not done it correctly. And I almost died. So I'm thinking to myself, here I am. I'm a kid again, what am I doing? I went through this, I almost died. Like, I must be the most terrible person in the world because all these people from churches are out there yelling at me, and I'm devastated. I don't want anybody to know. I knew that my friends at school had realized something was going on because it was pretty bad, So one of the things that I think is important for us to remember with mental health care is that when women are raped, they get blamed a lot, even by people who claim to love them. So my dad, I'm glad he can't hear this today. Um, he never asked me what happened. All he said to me as I was healing was, you need to not focus on boys and focus on school. I don't think to this day my dad knows what happened. And I've never talked to him about it because I'm still embarrassed to talk to my dad about it. So my mother decided to call the police. And in the meantime, I'm going to school, and it's a small community. And the one of my friends comes to me and she says, my mom asked me the craziest question. She wanted to know if you're a partier. Out of the blue, she just asked me that. She was one of the nurses in the emergency room helping me. So she was trying to find out information about me from her daughter. And so these people are just like, it's making me feel more and more like I could see how a child would get to the point, or a woman would get to the point of thinking about suicide. So my mom calls the police and the officer comes to my house. I did not want to call the police, but my mom was determined. The officer comes to our house and he basically says to me, it's going to be your word against his. And if you go to court, they're going to bring up all these things and, you'll be in, it'll be a long trial. Do you really want to go through that? And I didn't. I mean, I was already just devastated. And so after he left, my mom wanted me to have him charged. I did not. I begged her not to do it, and she finally agreed not to do it. But this is the reason that we have such a low percentage of women reporting rape or sexual assault, because of situations like this. Women are not supported. And this is important for us to remember as educators on our campuses, that we will have women who are in this situation. And so we're going to talk just a little bit at the end of things that we can do to help support our female students so they can be successful. Okay. So some contributing factors, as we have mentioned, about why women don't report. The number one, okay, so we have individual student fears of reporting to school authorities or law enforcement. So I just want to share you a case that's in the media right now. There's a young lady who at 18 went out, some of us when we go to as freshmen off to college, and we might have a little bit of fun. Well, she went, this is, oh gosh, Hobart and William Smith University in New York. And this is a case that's happening right now. She went to a frat party and she was intoxicated, and so she was raped at the party. She remembers some things. Some of it she doesn't remember, some of it she does. She remembers being taken upstairs into a room and seeing a couple of guys in there pulling off their pants, making her give them oral sex. She remembers them taking her to a little bar, and one of them had her at the bar over the pool table and having sex with her. And she comes in and out remembering that. And of course, there are people there looking and recording. And so she decides afterward, the next morning, that she's going, well, she went to the school to report it to the school police. And in the US, what you can do on universities if you have been sexually assaulted on campus, you can either choose to deal with the situation within the university, or you can go outside and deal with it with the police. So she decided that she would do it, and they asked her to, which is common around the US. They asked her to handle it on campus. And so the campus police came and talked to her. They had, there were 3 people who listened to her statement. It took them just a few days to decide that the young man who had actually raped her was not guilty. So she says that what happens after that is she receives so much bullying, people accusing her of lying, and she almost committed suicide, and she went home for a year. She has now decided that she's going to go back to school at that same university, and her parents are trying to talk her out of doing that, but she wants to do it anyway, so that she can help other women on campus who have been experiencing similar things. Okay. The next thing is procedural gaps in how institutions record or respond. So we've talked a little bit about that. And according to the New York Times, there are 55 colleges and universities in the country under investigation for how they have not handled sexual assault cases properly. In North Carolina, there are 2, and one of them is the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and the other one is Guilford College. Now, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill has been in trouble before, so this is not surprising. They have been in trouble for not reporting accurately, and also trying to convince women not to go to the actual police outside of the college, or just to let the cases go. Like in my instance, where the police told me it's going to be your word against his. So Carolina is under investigation again for that. Okay, so another one, a reluctance on the part of institutions to be associated with any kind of program that would help limit or educate people on the problems with sexual assault on campus, because the idea is that if you're focusing too much on these programs, then it says to maybe parents or donors that there is a problem within the institution. So that can be one of the contributing factors for those low numbers as well. Okay. So, and of course, it could be a combination of all of those. I think the most important one is the first one, students being afraid to go. I know I was. Okay. So what I want to do for a minute is talk about this. So this was in the news as well. So after Roe versus Wade was overturned, there were cases, and this is from the Yale School of Medicine. There was an uptick in vasectomy consults, and so Yale said that there was an increase of over 850% of the search term, "Where can I get a vasectomy?" All right, and then not surprisingly, the top 2 states showing an increase were Texas and Florida. And that's because they have some of the strictest abortion laws right now. So, okay, Yale Medicine Urology, they saw a sharp uptick in those consults. So the reason we're bringing this up is because When this was happening, it was all over the news. Look at all these wonderful young men who are wanting to go and get vasectomies. We're celebrating them. This is a wonderful thing. And it is. It's important for men to take responsibility as well. The other side of that is that there are women, when they go to their doctors, they've had their children, they're in the process afterward, they want to get their tubes tied. And many women are encouraged not to do that because they may change their mind later and want to have more kids. I have a former student right now. She and her husband, they had one child. That child just started kindergarten. They had another one 2 years ago, and that baby died of SIDS. She wanted to get her tubes tied, tubal ligation, and her doctor would not, because they're young, they're 27, 28. And her doctor would not do it because she said she was depressed and would probably change her mind and want children later. Now, I imagine if her husband, this is just my opinion, if her husband went to get a vasectomy, I doubt very seriously that they would have turned him down. But the other thing that it brings up, that men have more power even in this situation, where they can go, we celebrate them, and then we come to situations like contraception. So there are debates in many of the states, and I think that North Carolina is one of those considering that right now, not giving women access to contraception. For some, and I know many of you know this, for some Catholic hospitals or doctors' offices, they will not prescribe contraception to women, but they still will prescribe Viagra for men. Some insurances will not cover it. Many of the organizations that are Christian owned will not cover contraception, but will cover, under their insurance, will cover Viagra. So we still see women in cases where they can't choose. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that, and this comes on the next slide, but I want to point this out under this as well. And we're very fortunate at Vance Granville, I have to say this, when women on campus want access to condoms. In a lot of schools, that's not something that women are given the opportunity to do. So for example, at Vance Granville, we have condoms in both the men's and the women's restrooms. And in some cases, people will only put them in the men's restrooms because, again, the choice is up to a man and not to a woman. The other thing that I don't know if you're aware of this, but so in North Carolina, when Governor Cooper came into office, one of the laws that he put into place, if a woman, and this is not endemic to North Carolina, but if a woman and a man were having sex and she changed her mind at that point of penetration, he did not have to stop. This is only a few years ago when Governor Cooper came into office. So that has been changed in North Carolina. And if he doesn't stop now, the woman can go to the police for rape. The other, oh gosh, I cannot remember what it's called. There's a name for it. It is not right now illegal. It is in California. It was just made illegal for a man when he's having sex with a woman, and if he's wearing a condom, for him to take it off without her knowing and to continue to have sex with her. And so she could get pregnant as a result of that. That is not illegal in many states. The governor of California just made that illegal. So again, you're still seeing these things. So if a woman in that situation got pregnant and she wanted to have an abortion, then you would, again, see those kinds of situations where people would blame her, even though it wasn't her fault. So we're going to talk now about some recommendations. And this is from the Chronicle of Higher Education. They've done a little bit of research on this. So the first one, and this would be for faculty and staff, show empathy. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to give up your beliefs, that whether you are, a Christian or Muslim, whatever, Jewish, you don't have to give up your beliefs. You do not have to, regardless of your political party, go against those beliefs. You have to remember that the woman you are dealing with is experiencing a time in her life where she may consider suicide, depending upon the way we treat her. And I will give you one example. I know someone who is a Christian. I'm a Christian. And she's very, very conservative and against abortion. And that's her right. Absolutely. So what she says all the time, like all the time, is that I don't, especially in North Carolina, she's like, I don't know why people in North Carolina are upset because they still can murder their babies. It's fine. And so, and it's like this rhetoric all the time that she posts on social media, that she says out in public. And I know her, I grew up with her, and I know that she's a good person, but she is so conservative, and which again is fine. But her reasoning for talking like this, and she says, as a Christian, the Bible tells her that she has to tell the truth to people. And that's true. In the Bible, it does say that we have an obligation to do that. But you're supposed to do it with love. So if you want someone, and I actually told her this, I finally told her, if you want a woman to come to you and ask you, and what should I do? That woman is not going to come to you if you are constantly saying hateful things like that. So in our situation as faculty and staff, regardless of how we feel about abortion, we have to remember that these women have feelings. They're going through a very difficult time in their lives. And so showing empathy will be important in making sure that they are successful in whatever they choose. Okay, provide guidance to employees. And so this would be important for an executive team to consider giving guidance to employees. So how do we handle if a student comes to us and is upset, struggling in class, and we realize, okay, something's going on, the grades are falling, the student is not coming to class, and then that woman comes to us and says, I'm pregnant, this is what happened. Whether the woman says, I was raped, or I just cannot afford to have a baby, how do we handle that? So we need some kind of, I think, professional development, although we're busy as it is, but we need guidance. What do we do? Who do we refer these students to? What do we do if a student says to us, I don't want to go talk to that person, I need to talk to you, I trust you. So what do we do in that situation? And so we do need some kind of guidance from our executive teams for faculty and staff. I think that will be important. And this, again, this is according to the research. So it's not something I made up, but it's a good idea. So other things are important, making sure that we respect a woman's right to get birth control. if you don't believe in that, and one of my best friends is Catholic, and so is Mr. Bryan over here, he's Catholic. But my best friend, nobody in her family believes in birth control. And they have a lot of kids, and that's okay. But if our students want access to birth control and they don't know, some people don't know how to get access to that, they will, maybe ask us, and we can, like at Van Scramble, we can say, hey, we have some condoms in this bathroom. But there are other places where they can go if they want to get on the pill. They can go for free, go to Planned Parenthood, go to the health department, those different kinds of places. And I think it's something that we just as faculty and staff can tell our students about that. The other thing is pregnancy testing. So we don't have that kind of ability on campus. Some universities do, where you could get the pregnancy test, but you can tell them where they can go, again, to Planned Parenthood or to the health department, and they can get those for free. Okay. The last one is most larger universities have health centers that any student can go to, but with abortion, that's a specialized issue. And so it would be nice if we had some kind of place where women themselves could go and talk to somebody who specializes in this. They also, if they don't have access to that, they can go, there are Planned Parenthoods around most universities. Well, a lot of them got closed down, but there were before. And I know there was one near State where they can go and get information about that. Let me say one thing about Planned Parenthood. So there are some misconceptions about what Planned Parenthood does. They do not primarily provide abortions. It's, what is it, about 5%? About 5% of what they do is provide abortions. The other is pregnancy testing, is helping with birth control. It's testing for things like breast cancer, cervical cancer, all of those different things, vaccines for the HPV. Yeah. And so for us as faculty and staff, we can, if you don't believe in abortion, we can still send our students to Planned Parenthood for birth control or things like that. I guess you really have to think about the student and not our needs, but the student's needs, if that makes sense. Okay. Now, this I think is an important one. You should know the laws of your state. And I think, again, the executive team would probably need to, even if we're not going to guide students, we still need to know the laws in our states so that we do not violate the laws in our states. So, for example, in North Carolina, the law for abortion is that if a woman wants an abortion, she has to go to the doctor. She has to wait 72 hours. And during that time period, she has to talk to a health professional about what options she has. And so the options have to include adoption. So that's for North Carolina. Now, in cases of rape or incest or something like that, in some states, I know Texas is one of those, you have to prove that you've been raped. So you can't just go and say, I've been raped and I want to have an abortion. Because the idea in states like Texas is that you may take that as an opportunity to have a number of abortions over and over if you're just out having fun and just getting pregnant too many times. So And in states like Texas, the way that you have to prove rape is that you have to show bruising. You have to show, if you can, vaginal tearing and bleeding. You have to prove that you fought back in some states. But that negates those women who do not fight back, who just are trying to survive and will hurry up and let the rape occur. There is a case going on right now where a woman is claiming that she was raped. The person says that she consented because he wanted her to tell him that she was having a good time. So she told him she was having a good time. And but she was doing that so that the rape would be over quickly. So in a state where you have to prove that you've been raped, where you fought or you had tearing or something like that, she's not going to have that option. So when we think about what our female students may be going through, I guess I can share this. I have a student who right now is, she's underage, and she actually wrote a paper about this. She was groomed, and but she was emotionally groomed. And then someone older in her family had sex with her, and she is trying to prove that she was emotionally groomed, but she's having a lot of difficulty doing that because emotional is different from physical. And so the law is trying to say to her, well, this didn't really happen. Maybe you wanted it to happen. Were you maybe dressing too provocatively to entice him? And even family members are saying this to her. And it does happen. There are cases where young women are raped, and there are cases of incest, and mothers will blame the daughters, for example. We know, again, there are cases of incest. The 11-year-old little girl, I'm sure you are familiar with, the 11-year-old little girl who in her state could not get an abortion. And the reasoning was, at 11 years old, she's not developed enough in her brain to decide that she wants to have an abortion. But the other side of that is that she's old enough to have a baby and take care of it. So the cases of incest they're very interesting. I don't know if you are familiar with Oprah Winfrey's case. She was raped by her cousins and her uncles, and she got pregnant as a child. The same thing happened with Maya Angelou. And so it's, people we know are going through this. The incident, according to the American Association of University Women, is 1 in 4 on college campuses, but 5 in 1,000 will actually be prosecuted. So this is something that we should be thinking about so that we can support the mental health of our women who want to either have an abortion or have had one. We put our own feelings aside and take care of their needs so that they can be successful college students. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts or anything you'd like to say? I know that was depressing. It was depressing for me to talk about. Any questions?
I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but there are several comments. Um,
Okay.
So not a question, but a truth. Those numbers are often skewed and manipulated. When I was in university, I personally knew 4 women who were raped, 2 by the same football player. All were reported to campus security and forbade under threat of expulsion from this Baptist university from reporting it to the police. Their website consistently says 0 sexual assault, 0 incidents of domestic abuse.
And that's pretty common. Yeah.
Another comment, Governor Abbott thinks it's what all women who want an abortion are doing. Ignores the freeze component of trauma.
Mhm.
And then the final comment is, I find it interesting that ectopic pregnancies weren't discussed. I know 2 people that would have lost their life had they not terminated the pregnancy, one of which was out of work for weeks after her emergency procedure.
There's a case right now, was it on NPR that we read about? She was in that situation and she was in a different state where,
Kansas.
yeah, in Kansas, but she lived in Kansas and then went to another state. Yeah, and so she was losing, having a miscarriage, and they were afraid to treat her because it would be considered an abortion if they gave her a D&C. And she bled and bled. They would send her home. She would go sit in the bathtub and bleed and bleed. And then to the point that at one point she passed out and her husband called 911. And again, yeah, again. And this is just a week ago, I think it was on NPR, but she almost died because they were so afraid of the laws. What were they supposed to do? And they just kept sending her home for that. It was 2 days worth that she went back and forth to the emergency room, and she was just sitting, literally sleeping in the bathtub because she was bleeding so much. So, yeah.
Just a couple more comments. Thank you so much for the grace and authenticity with which you've led this session. We learned so much helpful information in terms of student advocacy. And thank you for being so vulnerable with us and sharing your story. I am horrified by the data you shared.
Mm-hmm. It is, you know, that data that is shared by Planned Parenthood and the American Association of University Women. That's the data that they're getting. And women are afraid and to report the rape. And just like, well, many of us are, because it's embarrassing, it's humiliating because we get blamed for it.
One final comment. To your point, it's important to know the resources to which we refer students in our community.
Mhm.
Planned Parenthood is often the only resource that we will discuss all options and not guilt students into one option. They get a bad rap and are the most comprehensive resource for women.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely. And I think it's going to be important for our colleges and universities to train us on what laws we have and what we're able to say to. I mean, that's just the reality.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions or final comments, I want to thank everybody for attending and participating in this session, navigating a post-Roe v. Wade culture on college campuses, and enjoy the rest of your conference. And thank you, Ms. Fink, for sharing with us today.
Y'all have a good day.